Opening Day by Starmanalex. Bob was a nervous wreck today. Granted, Bob Belcher had probably never had a day in his life where he wasn't stressed out or overthinking. But today was worse than normal, because today was the grand opening of Bob's Burgers. Oh, Bobby, isn't it so exciting? Our own restaurant filling people's hungry bellies with delicious burgers. I should come up with a theme song. Bob's wife, Linda, was the definition of a golden retriever. She never seemed to have a frown on her face, always looking on the bright side of things, an optimist through and through. Bob and Linda balanced each other out. When Bob was a nervous wreck, Linda could be the calm in the storm, the anchor to bring him back to shore. Despite how much he adored his wife, though, nobody could stop Bob's anxiety today. What if Dad was right? What if I don't make it into the restaurant business? What am I going to do after this? I didn't even go to college, and we have Tina on the way. What the hell am I going to do if this doesn't work? Bob? The man's anxious-filled thoughts were abruptly cut off by Linda's surprisingly quiet voice. She always seemed to know when Bob was in his head, overthinking it all. Lynn, I don't know what we're going to do if this doesn't work. I mean, I didn't even go to college. I always just had my stupid dream. It's not stupid. Bob looked at Linda, whose face was painted with a mixture of love and concern. She pulled Bob into a hug, rubbing soothing circles into his back. He was careful to not put pressure on Linda's belly where their baby was. Their teeny Tina, as Linda liked to say. You should have just married someone who had money. Then you wouldn't have to be pregnant and working for a restaurant doomed to fail, Bob said quietly. He hated to show his emotions. After his mother died, his father didn't show emotions, and he was too afraid to express how he felt. Linda was one of the only people in his life that he had shown his true thoughts around. His hopes, his dreams, his fears. Linda was the first person to truly support his dream of a burger restaurant. Bobby, I love being here. Even if one day we end up living in a box, I would be happy. We have each other and our teeny Tina on the way. What else could I need? I would rather be poor with you than married to a rich Hugo, she said, wrinkling her nose at the thought of her ex-fiancé. Bob chuckled at that. I know we'll make it, and even if we don't, we have each other. That's all that matters to me. Bob felt his heart squeeze at those words. He always feared he wasn't good enough for Linda. He was poor, had a gut that seemed to grow every day, thinning hair, and was quite the pessimist. Linda was bright, beautiful, and one of the kindest women he had ever known. Even after getting married, those doubts still crept in. But to hear those words, to hear that Linda would be okay being poor as long as they had their little family. Bob kneeled down and kissed Linda's pregnant belly before reaching up and giving Linda a chaste kiss as well. It was simple and sweet, but it still made his heart race. Being around Linda tended to do that to him. Thanks, Lynn. Bob gave his wife a small but genuine smile. He ran a hand through his hair as he looked up at the clock. 5 minutes to 11. It was almost time to open these diner doors for the first time. We got this, I promise. Tina and I believe in you, Linda said cheerfully. She walked to the counter to start putting out ketchup and mustard bottles for each booth. Bob walked over to the entrance, hesitant about opening the doors, but seeing Linda humming her happy tunes to herself as she placed napkins and menus on tables, he knew that everything would be okay. He flipped the sign to say open and unlocked the doors. Bob sighed, wiping sweat from his brow as he turned the sign that said open to closed. He was tired. Today was surprisingly busy. Some kind of festival at the wharf brought more customers in than usual. The kids weren't exactly the most helpful, having ketchup and mustard wars and trying to make origami birds out of napkins instead of serving guests, but they were happy, and to Bob that's all that mattered. Dad, Jean called out. He was spinning in one of the bar stools. Jean, don't spin on that, you're going to get dizzy, Bob said with a sigh. But we're hungry, Louise chimed in, dangling her small feet off the counter. How she manages to still have so much energy after a long day, Bob will never know. Dad, Bob's oldest daughter, Tina, gently tugged at his shirt. Can we please go eat something? What do you expect us to do, Father? Starve on the streets? Beg for scraps? Jean was laughing as he whined, so Bob knew he wasn't really being serious. Bob groaned. He did feel bad for keeping the kids in the restaurant all day, but he needed all hands on deck today. Bobby, why don't you let them go to the wharf and get some tacos? Linda popped her head out from the kitchen, her hair tied back in a messy bun. The 3 kids perked up at the mention of the wharf and tacos. Pretty please, Daddy? Louise said innocently. She knew her father tended to give in to that name. Ugh, fine. The kids began to cheer as Linda pulled out her wallet and gave each kid a $10 bill. "Stay together and come back before it gets dark," Linda called out as the Belcher kids scrambled to the door and ran down the street. Bob watched them from the window, Linda coming up behind him and hugging him. "They'll be fine, Bobby. Tina's responsible." Linda kissed her husband's cheek as she went to grab a rag to clean off the tables. As Bob began to sweep up all the crumbs, he couldn't help but look at his wife, his Linda. Even when she was covered in sweat and smelled like burger grease, he still thought she was the most gorgeous woman in the world. "Thanks for everything, Lynn." Linda looked up at her husband, her head cocked to the side in confusion. "What are you saying thank you for, silly?" "For sticking around, for supporting my dream and the kids, even when money was tight. Not many people would do that, so, I just want to say thank you," Bob said sheepishly, rubbing the back of his neck. He was never great with words, but he really did mean what he said. Linda smiled and kissed Bob. "Of course, Bobby. I love being with you and our kids. I couldn't ask for a better life," she responded, squeezing his hand as she went back to cleaning the tables. Bob and her worked in a comfortable silence. As they locked up for the night and headed upstairs to get their own dinner as they waited for their kids to get home, Bob couldn't help but feel so very content. "I wouldn't trade all the money in this world for this life." Thank you for listening, and I hope to see you next time.